Nick from Bridge City Sessions. Our guest today is Millennial Falcon from Portland, Oregon. How's it going, dude?
It's really well. How you doing?
I'm doing all right, just hanging in there. So you go by Captain Contingency?
Yeah, it's after coming up with enough fallback plans in life, it just felt like a really fitting name.
Yeah, do the other band members have clever names as well?
Yeah. Fred, we've had quite a few members over the years, and each one gets an interesting name. Fred right now is Dr. Roxo with 2 X's, okay. And then our guitarist Cam is Stormy Trump, the entrepreneurial D-bag descendant of both Donald Trump and Stormy Daniels. He'll sell you the shirt off your own back.
Nice. So that's kind of like his slogan.
Sorta. We've been doing this Trump University thing where he gives out diplomas that are absolutely worthless and takes donations at shows and stuff. And he wears a suit covered in dollars like that one guy. I want my money. It's my money, and I want it now.
Yeah.
So he's a slimy capitalist D-bag is his character.
Gotcha. I saw some live streams recently, and is that the kind of outfit choice that you guys typically do? Because I saw the room and the outfits were, a little different than when you performed in your session.
Yeah, it kind of comes and goes. We had the jacket for a while, and people don't really like
Hey, buddy, this whole last 10 seconds or so is cutting out.
So even goes then. Oh shit! You still with me?
I'm still with you, but for 15 seconds, that whole thing just got super glitchy, and then It happens. These aren't perfect, and we can edit some of this stuff out, and that's why I like to not do them live, because it just seems like there's so much that I can kind of make it better and fix it in post. So we were talking about what you're wearing in your live streams is different from what you were wearing in your session, and you were talking about your jacket, talking about the jacket.
It's just kind of hard to get people in on shows that have props and costumes, and so it varies. And a lot of the time it just doesn't feel right to show up in some extravagant outfit. It's an interesting thing having comic looking characters in that, and then trying to be yourself, because oftentimes it conflicts and you just got to go with your gut, So we showed up for that session. We're like, fuck it, let's just play some damn music and kill it, or to the best of our ability,
Gotcha. So I was reading your bio, and I just have to say this out loud because I just found it really interesting. So, and this is from your Facebook. It says you're an anti-corporate synth punk band with an ongoing original comic book series, Spaceship, powered by music, fighting the Federation of Job Creators.
Yes.
So can you tell me
Oh, I'd love to.
Yeah, I want to hear about what is this band about? I know that you have a comic book series that has to do with your albums. Each album has a chapter or I want to hear about this.
So, the gist is the way I see it is we're here in this reality. We play music, we work these jobs, the world exists the way it does, but this parallel kind of reality, which we write out in the comics, it's autobiographical in that there's similar characters to who we are, but the world is a bit different, and it's sort of like an outer space opera. It functions on the same kind of archetype that Star Wars does, where there's an evil empire. But in this context, it's what we call the Federation of Job Creators, which is kind of the ultimate conglomerate corporate thing. All industry is combined to create one totalitarian fascist regime. You get assigned to an industry from birth, and for instance, the character that I kind of play and have created for this series, Captain Contingency, really wants to play music, but somehow fucks up with that industry and winds up being banished to working in food service, which is, like all industries, some kind of a scam within this. And so the Federation of Job Creators and the Millennial Falcon, who figure out some bullshit to create music to turn into energy, which would disrupt the system based on oil and all this other crap, and basically creates enemies with all this. And so as the series goes on, it's a consistent kind of struggle between your day. I used to call it the ultimate fuck work fantasy, because it really just, instead of all these far-fetched, like, totalitarian concepts, really boil it down to, I'm fighting the thing that wants to monetize everything. Am I able to live my day-to-day life without, like, how many people am I paying to live my day-to-day life? And if that, I mean, I don't know. I'm petering out on the explanation, but I hope I've kind of encompassed a little bit of
Yeah, no, there's a lot going on, and it's really interesting, and I find it makes the band a lot more unique in that way, because when you start to read about the band, you know, it's just not all about the music. There's a lot going on, and you know, it makes it interesting. I've always liked bands that have a big story and even some extreme, you know, comic book series where it's, you know, there's characters in the band and everybody plays their part. You know, I've always liked, you know, like that aspect. And so you guys are like battling you're battling with Disney, and I mean, like, you guys are doing a trademark battle, or I mean, what's this about?
We initiated this because, I mean, like, if you look at trademark law, it's super fucked and it favors corporations, which, I mean, considering who writes these laws and who practices them the most, it makes sense that if for instance, Disney, so let me explain. So I with the name like the Millennial Falcon, I figured I would be arguing with everybody about who came up with this idea first, and I really wanted to use it to stick it to Disney, who is buying up as many properties as they can. So I applied directly for a trademark, which you can do for a couple $100, and after a couple of years, it was about to register, and like I predicted, Disney shows up out of the blue, and they're like, "Hey, back off." And I'm like, "Why?" They're like, "Because that sounds similar to a thing that we're doing." I go, "It's not. It looks nothing like it. Why are you approaching me?" And I keep pushing this idea. It's because ultimately intellectual property is what trademark law dictates. And the way that it's set up now, like, for instance, Disney trademarked Hakuna Matata. I think it's Swahili. Forgive me for my ignorance. I don't really speak any of the languages, but that's just like a common phrase in another language. And they own that here. At one point, they tried to trademark Dia de los Muertos in like 7 different sectors of commerce so that they'd own it in everything from food to T-shirts. And that's just a holiday, you know, like, and it's all because they made a movie that you can tie it into. So that kind of law really favors corporations. It doesn't favor parody, doesn't favor freedom of speech. It really works against you. I mean, you'd have to have a really nuanced case to start to pick away at that corporate power. Enter this thing where you have this parody, where you have a corporate overlord trying to control everything, and you have the Millennial Falcon, who inexplicably has an engine powered by music. Yeah. And they want that, and they won't stop regardless of what the cost is. And that's, as Disney and Lucas have pursued this, the parody kind of deepens because everything they're doing gets reflected in the comic book series. So the trademark board approached both of us after Disney had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I do all the legal work, and I'm not represented. I just stay 3 steps ahead and read as much as I can, and it sucks. But if this precedent is set, then, like, for instance, there's some legal blog picked us up, and they basically wrote this blog post laughing at me for citing the freedom of speech in parody. They're like, "What do you know about this law? Ha, you should know better. Corporations own this." And it's like, no, I really don't think that's how, like, for instance, in any other court of law, you can't have, if I'm my own lawyer, you can't have secret evidence. But in trademark law, Disney can say, "Hey, even though I'm trying to knock your trademark out of application by saying that you're going to affect my sales, I don't have to show you what my sales are because that would be private information and you're not a lawyer, and I can't have you disbarred for using that information in public." So they have no leverage over you when you're defending yourself, because it's not a civil case or anything else where it'd be unconstitutional to have private evidence. So like I'm only seeing some of their evidence come out now. The trademark board, because this parity keeps getting deeper and deeper, this has gone on for a couple of years, and they just said that it'll be resolved in September. So whatever happens in the future, if we win this, you could use it as precedent to work against corporations and use parity law to create. It also depends on the property. Like I don't know who's approached Rick and Morty. I don't know who approaches these other things that are clear referential things, but
Yeah.
because it's Disney and because they want to own all entertainment, you really start to get folks that have to do this. Like they have to show up. Like none of, they're all hired guns. All these lawyers will do whatever, like for X amount of money, they'll show up anywhere and sue the candy out of a baby's mouth. It's irrelevant, but they have to. It's weird. You've triggered this series of practices, which ultimately, it's a trip.
Yeah. I wonder who, they must have like a database or something that, if this name comes up or something similar.
When you're about to register with the trademark, they put out a trademark, like little zine basically. And they have a division of Disney that looks into this and says, oh, that looks like, I'll admit there are a lot of folks that are trying to really get one over and create some bootleg shit, which, fuck corporations, but it's interesting. Intellectual property is a trip and a half, and for all the abuses, it does exist to protect certain things, but I'm not the best candidate to talk about that.
Yeah. Gotcha. So, aside from all that legal stuff and, kind of learning, about the band and you putting out comic books, what have you been up to as a band since lockdown?
Just recording, weirdly enough. It's been a trip. Our drummer, Fred, his grandfather's in a hospice, and his grandfather's caretaker also is terminally ill, and with COVID being ravaging the medical system, Fred kind of indefinitely needs to move to Alabama to go be a caretaker on short notice. So we're tracking as much as we can with him for the time being, not knowing what happens next. And then, it's not as though there aren't folks within this kind of general collective that we work with that we could play with, but it's a bummer to lose somebody. We were just planning a tour too for, quote, when this was over and all this other stuff. So I feel lucky in my personal life. I think all of us feel good that nobody's dead, but it's definitely created a weird schism in all of our plans because of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Did any of this happen because of the COVID? Is this all kind of...
I think the caretaker would have otherwise been all right. I don't know. It's a strange scenario to have somebody who's terminally ill with cancer in a hospice taking care of another terminally ill patient. But I think COVID was the tipping point for whatever was happening there. And So Fred's going to go off on this adventure and do that.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you can all understand, and there's no hard feelings.
It sucks enough to have to be uprooted. It's far be it for us to be dicks about it. That would be really uncool.
Yeah. Yeah. Understandable. So it's just going to be you and Cam for the time being once he leaves, and then you're just going
kind of up in the air at this point with it.
Yeah.
We've gone through, one of the running jokes is it's a collective I started, and the comic thing is my baby, and these are all my really good friends and musicians I fucking love playing with, and so part of the thing about the Millennial Falcon is that lineups come and go, and I got tired of, I've been drumming in other people's bands my whole life, and I realized that if I just sat at the center, no matter who comes and goes, which is kind of a depressing thing to say sometimes in a scenario like this, it's nice to be able to know that you're not at the whim of a specific lineup. We did good with this lineup.
Yeah.
We did good with what the next lineup sounds like, but everything's in such a state of flux. That's the only confidence I can really muster. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. So I see that you have a single for Trickle Down Economics is a Golden Shower for the Poor, which is it's kind of a crazy song title. But is this, you have a record in the works, or is this just a single on its own?
So that and the last three like full band singles we put out are on an album called Acid Slapped that should be out in July with the new issue of our comic and stuff.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
So how many records now do you have? And your comic books just are basically around the concept of each album? Is that how it goes?
It's just as every album kind of captures the time frame that we're playing music in. It's the same with like the broader story of what's happening for each issue, essentially. Like the kind of behind the scenes stuff that isn't captured within the music is what the comic kind of picks up on, like dynamics between band members, outside forces that create pressure. Like the new bad guy in issue 1 was we had this character Wart Dosney, who's Walt Disney's frozen head inside a giant mech body, and he just wants merchandising rights. And that was a fun guy.
Yeah.
Sure, he'll show back up eventually. It's a trip trying to consistently release comic books. It's a slow going process for sure.
Gotcha. Do you have your stuff in stores, or is this just like on? Okay, cool. Any place in Portland that I could encourage people to pick one up when business is open?
Over at Pictures and Words over on Division. If you're in San Francisco, for sure Silver Sprocket's the spot to check it out. Or if you're in Denver, we're over at 7th Circle. We got some spots opening up in Oakland that are going to have the comics soon. But the Bandcamp is like the main spot to go to for sure.
Gotcha. Cool. So I realized, or when we were talking during your session, you told me about keyboards as a new thing that you picked up, and this all happened due to you hurting yourself. And I was just curious how this all happened and how it led to you playing keyboards.
Well, we were playing at one of the, I guess the second Icebreakers show, one of the shows outside Ice headquarters, and we were playing a set, and my guitar had gotten unplugged, and we were lacking in energy, so I took this jump off this amp once I plugged it back in, and it was raining, and it kicked out from under me and just shattered my right arm. You can't really see it anymore. They never really removed the bar, but it got put back together eventually. But there was this period where I just didn't really have a working right arm, and I was playing guitar and drums for most of my life, and it really, instead of letting it upend me, I just figured out what I wanted out of synthesizers and used as much time as I could to like go back on whatever I could get from piano from lessons as a kid or whatever. And like ultimately, like we built this lineup. Cam was a buddy of mine who liked the same albums, and Fred and me, and Fred drove me to the hospital. We were at the time, we'd been playing with a bassist and had a much more guitar centric lineup, and it just kind of went out the window. But I don't know about you. I like the synth better. I realized personally I wasn't saying what I wanted to with guitar rock. It just didn't fit what I was trying to do anymore,
Yeah, well, I always like synthesizers because I don't feel like enough bands use it anymore. And, for a genre like yours, I think that it really adds to the dynamic. And if you didn't have synths before, I really dig the choice of bringing it to the band. And so I notice you have a guitar player, drums, and synth. You just chose to do away with bass because you're basically filling that role. Is that kind of more or less?
It's it definitely, there are times where it becomes less nuanced. But yeah, the little synth I have on my left side is just such a beefy fucking Sonic Youth sounding chunky bass tone that like it didn't make sense to try to figure out how to work around that. And traveling with 3 people just makes it a little bit easier to sleep in the van in San Francisco or wherever. Yeah,
and 3 pieces are always awesome, So yeah, well, that's cool. So that record's going to be coming out in June or July, you said?
At the end of June, we're going to release it digitally, and then we're going to use it as a pre-sale. If you order it while it's available, we'll send you the comic to your house as soon as that comes out in July. And it's going to be fucking good. It's illustrated by this guy, Marcus Moreno, from over in the Bay. I forget exactly what city. He's in his band, The Ryans. They're fucking awesome. They sound like vintage 70s, 80s era punk with, but like, you know, like creatively reimagined.
Right on. So you recorded with Joe Coons. And is this a studio at his house, or was this a
Joe's got a pretty rad studio over at his spot. He is kind of just starting out. He's worked with a couple of local bands, and can't recommend him enough. If you hit us up and you need somebody to help you recording and you're watching this right now, I'm going to shamelessly plug it, please. He's cool. He works on like anybody's budget. And you know what I like about this guy is that like, for all the cats, like usually friends, I don't like to work with folks that I don't feel good about or that I have to feel too professional about. There's this tendency to not. Joe listens to a bunch of ska punk and folk punk, and the fact that he's willing to listen to stuff with that harsh a tone, because I love that shit too, really reflects well when he mixes other genres, whereas a lot of other producers kind of shy away from that abrasiveness, and you kind of need that quality in a, like, even if it's diluted by other stuff, you need to have something that harsh, otherwise it doesn't rock. It's kind of, it is what it is, you know?
I've always liked people, recording engineers that understand all genres really well, because it really, you know, when you're doing, let's say a rock or experimental, you know, kind of rock band, and you come from a background of metal and punk, I feel like you know how to make it sound the way it should, and know when those influences should really be there from different genres. And I just feel like the more you know about other genres, the better. You know, and did he produce you at all, or did you guys all just come to it all recorded and written?
We definitely show up with it. We show up with everything written, and then we work as collaboratively as we can once we get into the studio in terms of discussing like, oh, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? If you were like, what sound do you hear? Like there's certain things like synth tones and guitar pedals that, you know, we've been doing so long live that we know what's dialed in, but it's kind of like, what's the point of bringing somebody in if they're not going to add some sauce to it, you know? But,
so,
you first, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just kind of curious about, like, you know, like the writing process, because this newest record is definitely a different lineup. So this was the first record with the creativity from you three, or is this? Okay.
This was like, so I've started this project. The project's kind of my baby at the end of the day. But with each different lineup, every album is kind of like, I think at a point you decide to make an album and you're like, oh, this is going good. Everybody here is locked on this path. I want to capture this. Yeah. And there have been a couple other instances of that. I did one or two on my own, but with this one, it was like we'd been touring for a little bit just around the West Coast and just locked in what we wanted with the synths and the guitars. Because, I mean, Fred's always on point with the drums, you know what I mean? Like, and Cameron had never really been in a touring band before, and I had never really played synths before, so both of us were kind of like trying to figure out what to do. And it was cool to have somebody at the core that could play drums really well and hold it down. And once we laid down most of the album before we left on this crazy wacky tour in November where we all wound up hitchhiking, and then it was like it's weird, you know, you go through this experience where it's super harrowing on your band and everybody's biting their nails off and you go, we're never going to break up. And then you wind up in a global pandemic and you know what I mean? It's just it's fucking crazy what you think is going to be the most ridiculous thing just a couple months before, you know?
I don't think anybody was expecting this whatsoever. I mean, I am like still like, I don't even know how to react when things start opening up. I'm like, man, like I am still just wanting to like hide out because I just feel like people are going to rush out and get sick again. And it's going to start this whole thing all over again. And I just like, I don't know what to think. So
I'd gone back to work. A buddy of mine I used to play synths with was working at this liquor store. And it wasn't that the store did anything wrong by me specifically, but I quit after I was working the shift, and this guy He was just this kind of like young, obnoxious metalhead. Not that I have like, we were cool. I was ringing him up and he was like, I just drove in from North Dakota, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, cool. Well, welcome to Portland, smoke some weed. It's like, I can't, I got COVID. It's like, you're not wearing a fucking mask. You have me serving you. You get right up my face. Like, I'm wearing my mask. I'm fucking protected to go deal with
Yeah.
ET in a fucking FBI bunker. But that's the kind of shit that I can't stand is people like, whatever we declassify in 30 or 40 years as being true, for fuck's sakes, wear a goddamn mask, especially if you know you got it, don't go out in fucking public. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and
I don't know how that works. Like, what do you do? Do you order Uber Eats all the time and just pay out the ass once you get it?
I noticed that every time I went to the grocery store and I was masking up, that there were just tons of people just not even caring and not masking up. And I know that that's not just like if you're wearing a mask, you can't, get sick or you can't, you know, um, I'm not a doctor. I don't know if I'm carrying anything on a surface, but I know that if you can take a precaution as easy as wearing a mask and people aren't doing it, I'm just kind of like, why? I just don't get it. Like, it's one thing if you can't afford one, but I mean, at this point, everybody's selling them and everybody is eager to.
Bandana. Anybody can look like a bandit with that fucking cowboy shtick. I mean, I don't know how helpful it is, but like, it's something. If you don't have one and you say you can't afford one, I believe you. I'm going to take that at face value, but I believe there are a lot of options. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you were to tell me you couldn't afford one, that's such a. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I would believe that. I think you could figure something out if you wanted to, but I don't want to sound insensitive. I mean, there are plenty of people that are getting fucked right now. But, being empathetic is hard to have a declarative stance like, yeah, fuck those guys. Because I was about to say like, yeah, but except for these folks over here, you know what I mean? Or like, actually, you know what I mean? A little stoned.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Cool. So, I want to know more about this fake publishing millionaires. You got half in Portland, half in Oakland. Tell me about that.
We make weird zines. We put out the Millennial Falcon comics. My bud Chris and I make weird zines and try our best to put out everybody's short novels. We just got one from Ireland the other week that I've been dying to crack open, but haven't. It's weird to say I haven't had the time, but with all this recording and stuff, I've been. But yeah, we've been doing this. I was in New York doing it for a while with our friend Emma and doing this weird public access TV show back then that was Film Time with Ray. But we just eventually settled on trying to get as many literary zines around the country as possible and try to see how many people are pissed off enough to try to write something good in a time where writing's kind of not. People don't really read now, which, I mean, I get it. Netflix is rad. Like, the internet has a million TV shows, but this is definitely not the age of the novel. You know what I mean?
Yeah. What do you encourage people, like how do you engage with these people?
Well, I mean, I've been trying to find folks on the internet. It was a bit easier when I was living around New York. It was a bit easier around Brooklyn because of the just severe size of it to find people that wanted to write zines or wanted to do this or that and had pre-existing groups. And they exist in certain cities, but for instance, right now with the quarantine, lots of stuff is going digital, which is kind of for instance, we've done a bunch of digital zine libraries and stuff, and they're fucking awesome conceptually. But I mean, people already have a hard enough time reading ebooks. I find it even weirder to try to then suggest that you can go to a PDF library and read all the independent zines that you didn't buy to begin with unless you were part of it's a community thing for sure. But then so are comics. It's weird. Stuff like that will survive society going down, but it's nuanced. I don't think it would survive a paperless format. I think you'd still have to have printing. And, people would still have to, it's fascinating. It's just like punk rock, people love it and keep it going, but a few false moves will bring the whole thing down because it's super low budget,
Yeah. So aside from the printing, do you find yourself kind of going a different avenue in the future to try to maybe an audio book type thing or a podcast? Is that something you're working towards?
Little bit. We've talked about it. We've got this piece coming out soon. Naomi Morena, who runs a local band called, oh, it's just fucking killing me. I'll double back to what they're called. They're rad. They do like Pussy Riot covers, and she's just a badass activist. She did an interview with us talking about kind of like she was playing a lot of folk music in the 60s and bouncing around. And as a woman in LA, she like was hitchhiking and wound up at the Manson camp for a while, and all these other weird stories about big gurus trying to lure in kind of like any women they could in a time period where they're up on these pedestals as like gods. And we were trying to, it's weird that we started it in 2017 before Once Upon a Time in Hollywood came out. And then that came out and really kind of got that Manson thing going again. And it's not like we're trying to strike with anything like that, but it definitely puts an interesting perspective to have a major Hollywood picture come out and depicts that Manson Ranch within the time period that we've been looking over the story. So we're hoping to get that one out soon. And if Naomi's watching this, I'll hit you up for another interview soon.
Awesome. Yeah, I'd be really interested to, give a platform to all your fans. And
I left a couple of zines over at the Bridge City Session Space. I snuck them in somewhere, so you may find them at some point as you're tracking something.
What are these? You said
they're short stories. I left you a couple of collections.
Oh, I did find some stuff. It's a little tiny book.
Yeah. Thing. Yeah.
I was sitting there like taking a bong rip the other day, and I was like, "What is this on the table here?" And I was like, I started to like look at the cover, and I was like, "You never know what you're gonna find here," because honestly, so many bands bring random stuff like the Latter Day Skanks,
their hymn book is over there.
They leave stuff behind, and then we've got all these random books that vary in politics or just random stuff, so I never know what's going to be on our coffee table in the studio. So I was actually looking at that today. Oddly enough, it's just like sitting on the top. I don't know, like we've been cleaning, like I've been cleaning, I should say, and just going through everything and just wiping stuff down and digging stuff out, sweeping the floors. Just like I am literally like I've cleaned every inch of this place, and I mean it's a huge warehouse, so it gets dusty, and I can clean it, and then a week later it's covered in dust again. But
interviews yet mentioned that the crazy fucking slope to get up there into the session space, has that come up before?
Well, I know that like a lot of people that come here, and I want to say Chris from Knockdown maybe mentioned it, but yeah, like anytime a band comes here, that's like the one thing, like right when they get here, that just stands out, because it's just this weird hallway. And from what I've heard from our from the person that owns this building, is it used to be a animal feed mill, and those like 2x4s or 2x6s, the way that they're stacked like that is because they're all silos. And if you go to the upper floors, there's all these weird trap doors and pulleys and holes and stuff going through the floors. It's like, it's such a weird building. One of these days I'm going to have to like take my camera and find a way to just like show everybody, it's crazy. Like I've been so bored just looking at every inch of this building lately and just finding new things and just weird doors like covered up in different parts of the building where you're like, I wonder what's behind that wall, like there's just
did you find some spooky shit in there, like a treasure map or something?
Oh dude, it is so creepy. If you like go to these upper floors at nighttime, like I don't care if you love horror movies or if you're like don't believe in zombies and all that stuff, you're like you love that I freak out. Like I will, like that's where our circuit breaker is. So like when I trip the breaker, I have to go upstairs. And the guy that owns this building, oddly enough, has this creepy office up there, and it's just like this vacant floor, a desk, a chair, and like a lamp, and like it's like an office, in a totally like vacant floor, no walls, just super creepy. And yeah, I have to like go up there at night and like trip the breaker with my cell phone flashlight, and like I run downstairs like every time, just scared that something's gonna grab me or something. It's just,
especially trap doors, you were saying, right? Like that's
yeah, dude, it's bad. It's bad. Like you do not want to go like in the upper.
Totally. I think that I and probably anybody else that's trapped there would be really interested in the walkthrough of this building if you ever wanted to film one.
Yeah, well, I think so. We've had some Halloween parties and kind of like deck the place out on our floor, and it fits really well with the aesthetic here because I mean it can get really creepy. Like if we wanted to like do some stuff upstairs and kind of like have like this creepy haunted house, we could really go crazy with it and not have to rent any studio. You know, like we have our studio is creepy enough. So,
dude, I used to live in the spot where we would do haunted house. It was like an old party spot back east, and it was on this rum running path basically between Canada and New York. Somebody had been hung one time in the barn, and there's a barn out back, and somebody had been hung in like the 20s, and like they found a body in there and all that shit. And every year they would still use it as a haunted house, and so we would lose a bet and have to go set the haunted house up in this spot where they knew somebody had been totally killed.
Oh man.
Huh. Oh, I just reminded me of that. I wasn't trying to one up you or nothing.
Oh no. I just it just kind of gets my mind going, and I'm like, man, I bet there's so many creepy like haunted houses where like people, you know, like where they open places up because of all of the stuff that's happened there, you know, people being murdered, and then they like open it up and it's just like super haunted. Yeah, sometimes I'll go down that rabbit hole and watch some show on haunted places, or you know, prisons where tons of people got killed or something.
I mean, if there's any place that's going to be haunted, I feel like a prison or any other like fucked up place where people are suffering is going to be like number one. Like,
oh, totally. Yeah, and you look at the rooms too where people were like killed or had to like be held, and it's like, ugh, creepy stuff.
So in San Francisco, there's no graveyards, not one. It's all in Colma, which is like 2 towns down south. And if I'm not mistaken, they either built over all of the graves that were ever there or moved them. But there's one city with more dead people than there is a population of living people, and there's one city with absolutely no graveyards. And so it's like, and then Poltergeist is filmed about like, I guess, Marin County, like the next county over down there. So it's like, I used to think about that all the time when I was living out there. Like I was living in this old, like, we got this abandoned halfway house before it was tore down for a while. And it was just like, all right, we're in a city where all the bodies have been moved. And I'm in a place where a bunch of people were really sad until the city said they couldn't be sad here anymore. This is going to be fucking scary. And we'd find all these we used to find everybody's like old photo albums in the basement and stuff. Like, I'm not trying to rip on halfway houses. This one was just shitty. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, I'm sure they're all hit and miss, you know, I can't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So after you recorded you said that you went on tour, broke down, and had to travel with all your stuff. What happened? Was the van just broke down in the middle of tour and you guys had to finish the rest of the tour like that, or?
We like got as far as like, I want to say like Sparks, Nevada or someplace nearby. And the van just like died completely. We had all the gear, this whole thing was chock full. And we were walking around trying to find any place to stay, and it was fucking freezing. And we found this guy wearing this like America sweatshirt, and he was like messing around with Fred. Fred's like an ex-Marine, and this guy, I don't think he's a vet, but like there's just this quality where like, and he's also, Fred's from Missouri, and there's just this quality where he and a lot of like guys that otherwise would look at me with all my long hair and other shit and just not take me very seriously, like can just, and like they hit it right off, and the guy was like, "You hitching?" And Fred's like, "Nah." And we leave, and then this light bulb goes off. We're like, "Wait, we're hitching right now." So we get in this guy's car. He started talking to Fred because he had just flown across the country from Michigan to buy an RV off the internet from this guy, and he didn't really know exactly what quality it was in, and was trying to outrun this snowstorm to get back to Michigan to go on a hunting trip. But he was driving all alone and needed some company or whatever, and we were fucked. And so he made it pretty clear that he was armed and that he was more of a threat to us, but didn't want to be. So he was just he laid it right on the line. Like, "Hey, listen, like, I'll have you know, like, I'm more of a threat to you than you are to me." We're like, "Great, cool."
That's what you want to hear.
Yeah, it was like pretty disconcerting, and like none of us, for the first, like, it was like a 30-hour trip, and for the first like 4 or 5, like, it was like the dead of night. We're all tired, half drunk. We just drove like 3 states or something. It was already like we're on the tail end of like what we thought was going to be a night where we'd crash it somewhere. And so we all stayed up for most of it. And by the time I got to the next day, we were like, all right, as long as we keep paying for gas, everything's going to go smooth. And we were on good terms. And then I'm not going to sell anybody out, but one of us decided to try to use Google Maps and outsmart this guy's ancient GPS in the RV, and it gets us stuck on the service road. And the RV, which this guy's never used before, has no working heat, and now it started beeping, and we think it's going to die on us in the middle of nowhere, and there are cows all over the road. And this guy's finally starting to get heated, like, "Why the fuck did you do this? How'd you get us here?" And the RV's starting to like fall off the road. And finally we like get to the end of this service road, and we all start drinking. So at this point, we've got this guy drinking with us now. We had all the booze that we were traveling with.
Yeah.
So it's still like a good 14 hours left. There's just one problem. We're going through Montana, and the snow is closed off all of the fucking roads. So to get what we had to do, we had to loop up like through this bumfuck area of Montana instead of going the straight shot to get to Colorado where we needed to be. I forget exactly how it worked. We were all fucking scared for our lives at this point, but we were having a hard time getting through the storm. We're being rocked all over the place. All the highways are closed, and it's getting next to impossible to get gas. And what started as like 14 more hours is now like 30 more hours. So we're with this guy for like, oh God, like I want to say 60, that can't be possible over 60. It's like 30, 40, 45 hours or something like that. That was supposed to be like 14, and at this point we're running low on gas. We can't find a gas station, and we finally get to fucking some bumfuck town in the middle of Montana, and all the gas is frozen, which I did not know was a thing.
Yeah.
And so it'll pump, but it's going like a cent every minute. You know what I mean? So it's just up at the courthouse, and the dude decides to start hitting on the only woman in town, which, I mean, up to this point, it was kind of cool. It was that interesting thing, where it's like, I like punk music. I just trust the government. Somebody else that wants to ride a motorcycle around and shoot. I don't know, just be like, there's like outlaw, there's this perfect intersection between like punks and outlaw bikers where it's like you believe kind of the same things, but then you just diverge at a certain point. So like, it was interesting discussing how we had really similar conspiracy theories as we were driving along, and we got along despite everything. But then like, once we hit civilization, we were like, all right, we're not going to go pick a fight with these guys. And he was just sort of like, all right, I'm going to see if they come at me. We're like, oh no, this is not going to end well. But thankfully, nothing really came of it, and we got the gas and got moving. But at this point, the guy's starting to doze off, and none of us want to drive this fucking RV that seems like it's about to break down through an ice storm. So again, I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus, but one of us goes to this guy, hey man, I've got some Adderall. And the guy goes, I'm a fucking trucker, or I'm a biker. I've done, like, what was his line? He had like some line, like, I've done every speed imaginable. That won't do shit to me. And one of us is like, all right, well, whatever, it'll keep you awake. I'm just trying to help. And the guy's like, fine, and takes like probably more than he should have, just because he didn't know what the hell it was. And then like one of us, again, I'm not going to sell anybody out, is like, yo man, why don't you smoke some weed too? Now this guy's stoned and speeding, but doesn't believe that he will be affected by this stuff. So he pulls the RV over, and like fucking proceeds to try to reheat a pizza, finds a circuit problem, tries to trace the circuit through the RV, goes outside to try to fix one of the tires. He's just tweaking at this point, and we're stranded, and we're like 3 hours from being able to be away from this guy. So like, finally, you know, Fred, who's got any experience driving, like, I just presume from his military experience has probably driven something. He's like, fuck it, I'll do it, and just drives this thing over this fucking icy road with all the fucking signals going off, being like, hey, this thing's about to fall apart, and just we finally made it and picked up the rest of the tour and just met it up and just rented a car. But it was great. Like, it was horrifying, but I've never thought to hitch a ride with a full drum set, a couple of cabinets, synthesizers, guitars, merchandise, clothes, like really just, I mean, it was great. Like, but after that, we were like, hey, no matter what happens, like, we've been through this, like, you know, basically as soon as it was over, we checked into the first hotel we could find, and everybody like walked down a hallway and just bashed their head against a wall and took a shot and walked back. We're like, all right, we're back at, you know, square one. Let's, you know, just do, like, you know, what else do you even do at that point? But
so all that happened, and you were in Nevada when you started.
We started in Nevada, and we're Wyoming is where we wound up because Montana was such a pain in the ass. We had to cancel 2 shows and wound up in Wyoming in Cheyenne, I want to say. And then we rented a car and drove to play in Fort Collins, got snowed out of Montana again, so doubled back around, hit Colorado, and then a few other states till we wound up back here. It was a bunch of fun. I regret that we couldn't smoke weed in the rental car. Is my only regret.
Well, you know, there's lots of rest stops, so I'm sure you guys made it happen. And, you know, when you get to the show, I'm sure when you finally got to your next show, you were just like, finally. And I'm sure you guys could just finally relax when you got to the next.
We got to, in Fort Collins, there's a spot, Blast and Scrap, that they're great. They're like a little DIY collective, and we were playing with this dude who is a circus freak and was doing one of those human pinhead routines. Mm-hmm. And he was like, all right, for X amount of money, to put a little clarification, he volunteered himself to be the opening band for every set. Mm-hmm. For no money, but he was going to beg for money by hammering things to his body, which otherwise is interesting, but nobody really wanted that. It was Thanksgiving. Everybody was like literally eating turkey and watching a punk show. It was kind of like, well, I'm not working. And he's like, you know, for X amount of money, I will like put this nail someplace really uncomfortable. And Cameron just calls his bluff and goes, oh, your urethra? And he just shuts up. He's like, no. Anyhow, here's like another band, just kind of like he's done with this whole act. Yeah. I can imagine.
I mean, I could see that you might get, you know, put with some odd bands, you know, being a genre that's pretty experimental, you know, like a synth band, you know, could be, you know, put with a lot of different weird projects, but, you know, like, that's a pretty specialty thing. I could see people reacting that way.
I do enjoy a lot of circus performance. I used to travel with a lot of like carnival performance and circus performance stuff, and I got a lot of respect for folks that'll get up there and literally fuck their body up, but conscientiously, like when you put like a balloon between that little like passage right up there, it's like, you know what you're getting into. It's not the biggest risk, but it looks fucking crazy and freaks people out, you know? We used to do giant light shows and shit all up and down the East Coast. When I was in college, I lived with this group called the Waking Dream. They're still around doing. The last I saw them, they had these geodesic domes, and they would do like projectional on the inside. And I was working this event with them one time, and like we had finished setting this experimental one up that was made from this old tank parachute. So we staked the parachute in, inflated with fans, huge box fans, and then put this big spire to hold it up at the center. And after getting it set up, everybody got trashed, took a bunch of drugs, had a big psychedelic party, and this lightning storm hit, and I think it struck the generator, like something happened where this tent started going down and everybody was in like these, it was weird. We had to like bail folks out of this. It was like fucking nuts. We had to like basically pull folks out of this tent and try to get them into this open fucking rent a truck that was like a protection from the storm. And like, you know how it goes with like, you know, hippies and festivals. You're like, you got to get out of here. And people are like, not without my nitrous tank, you know?
Yeah. Oh man, that's hilarious. So I'm curious, what are some of the bands that you, like, what are some of the bands in your genre that you would like recommend for people to hear? You know, like if they want to check you out, what are some other bands that they should check out as well?
One of the groups that we really, really like is Idols. I don't think we do exactly the same thing, but they're fucking excellent. They're a British heavy rock group. I don't think they like being called punk. They are fucking cool. Same with Parquet Courts. It took me a while to come around on that group, but they're endlessly inventive, and I like that. I don't know. So Razor Cake just reviewed our last album, where we didn't have any synths going for us, and there was a lot more guitar driven. And I can't tell if it's a positive or negative thing they were saying, but they were like, it sounds like Cake meets All. And I was like, all right, I like those bands, you know.
Okay.
I don't think that this new stuff we're working on sounds at all like, I don't know. This band Snapped Ankles I've been listening to a fair amount lately. They've got some cool synthy fucking weird ass shit going. Devo, but that's a cop out to say, oh, we play synths, we sound like Devo, you know, like,
Yeah.
like we play guitar, therefore we're Clapton, you know, like.
Yeah.
I'm so open to new synth punk bands. I heard this band the other day. They're fantastic, called Fart Barf. They're
Fart Barf.
Fart Barf.
One word, two words.
One word.
Okay.
They're cool. I like them a bunch. They all wear ape masks, and they're two synthesizers and a drum set with vocorders. And then I guess one of the bands that we like, that I think Granddaddy, just hands down, we've been trying to do this thing where it combines all the cool kind of like lo-fi sounding electronic weirdness of that group with everything that I and most of the rest of the band like about that like 90s third wave of punk, where you get that triple time speed and just this like the reinvention of it was the coolest thing. That's what I really liked about all those Fat Records and Epitaph bands, was they're all playing this genre that it's like you know, like reggae music, like anything else. It's got these walls that are very visible that make it sound a particular way, but you can reinvent it as many ways as you can. You get all these different interesting band sounds, but I don't know. Punk's weird, man. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't been able to really find a lot of similar genres. Like, you really have to like know a few bands to look up and then to kind of go down that rabbit hole, because yeah, like all this synth music that I've listened to over the years, it has to do with like, you know, a certain type of punk where you know, your stuff kind of varies a little. So
I was listening to a lot of The Faint when we were working on this last album. I had never listened to them before, and Joe has been playing them a lot around the studio space. Was trying to combine a lot of like The Faint, or I grew up with a lot of Oingo Boingo, and just a lot of like Jeff Rosenstock. I don't think we do the same thing at all, but I absolutely love the way that he writes music. Same with like Pup, and a lot of melodic like contemporary punk rock really gets it in this interesting way that I appreciate. At least to me, like I think they get it.
Yeah, no, Pup is great. Yeah, I'm sad that I missed their last tour. It's like all these shows came through, and I was like, man, I'm too busy. And like now that I can't like do any of that stuff, I'm like, man, I should have went on that. I should have went to that show at least, you know, so I would have had, you know, something fun to remember this last year, because I feel like now the rest of the year is just going to be, you know, there is some good with the bad. You know, a lot of people are using this time to record. A lot of people are, you know, utilizing this time to make new content or, you know, like use their downtime wisely. But yeah, it's just been a weird time. So
we had a song when this started. We were all essential workers in one capacity or another, and all of us had gotten laid off from that and then rehired, and it became weird because we were writing this really fun song, and we were trying to vent our energy about that. But what the fuck do you say about a global pandemic during a global pandemic? Like, I've heard of a couple of artists writing about it, and they're already very established, and so it doesn't matter what I think. You know what I mean? But it just blows my mind. Like, yeah, art reflects how you feel, but I have a really hard time believing that. It's the same reason I have a hard time writing about love and romance. I have a hard time believing I'll have that nuanced thing to say about it. You know, like, what do you say about the global pandemic that isn't just repeating how people feel? Do people need you to repeat what they feel, or do you need to have a take on it that's like specific? And if you don't, is it the need? It's this big cyclical thought about like, why? Like, I don't know. Yeah, it became hard. I ditched the idea. Ultimately, it was that it just didn't make any sense to do. You know, to me, it didn't feel right. Like a breakup song where you don't really have all the right ideas about it, so you're just throwing things at a wall. You know,
yeah. Well, if it doesn't speak to you, then, you know, kind of throwing love songs with your songs revolving around your comics and stuff. You know, like you could add that theme to it if you wanted to, but if it doesn't really speak to you, then, you know, you got a good thing going on, and it's pretty entertaining.
You know what you never see though? Like, speaking of bands with comics, it's like the opposite way with Kiss. They always have songs about like romance and love, and like largely misogynistic romantic concepts, but they're never like, I'm a demon, I eat people. You know, it's just not, you don't really hear, but they spend all the money on the costumes. I feel like that's a missed opportunity.
Yeah. Well, you know, I feel like for how hardcore they looked, or in some ways, you know, that they, yeah, it was, I don't know. Kiss was never my thing. I just like, it was just way too happy, you know, like if they're going to dress like that, like give me something heavy, you know, like I grew up on, you know, like my dad introduced me to Guar, like,
Guar's sick.
Yeah, like I was introduced to Guar as a very young age. So like when I saw costumes and saw this look, I mean, their songs, their whole aesthetic, like that was that. It wasn't like I'm going to look like this hardcore like metal dude and then sing about love and stuff. And it's like, I could never, there was a part of that whole like glam rock and like hair metal scene where I think they're kind of just the darker version of you know, of one of those type of bands, and just never grabbed me.
That's what we kind of aspire. Like, I always thought it was interesting that they did that, and that's a like they have comics, but you don't go to see this band and think, oh man, this pertains to their comic books. You think, oh, that's Kiss, and I guess they have comic books. Sure, you know, there's like this weird detachment where none of it really it lines up. I find like that versus like the Gorillas are kind of the same way, where you know that they're cartoon characters, but maybe 30% of the people that will listen to anything they put out actually read and follow whatever the storyline is. I think it's an interesting archetype. We've been trying to play with that to see to what relation you can have an image and a thing, and to what relationship you have with just your casual listeners. You know, do people? A lot of people don't like comic books, but a lot of people will listen to music regardless of what it's attached to, which is kind of fascinating. You know?
Yeah. I think that, you know, kind of going back to the Kiss thing, they don't make that a very big statement. And like people that listen to Kiss, like from my perspective, whatever comic books or whatever that they probably have out, could have been fan stuff that was like just put together because they're such a legendary band that somebody just decided to make a little cartoon or a comic book or something. And so, you know, it's just like, I don't feel like when I read about you guys, that is very much ingrained in the fabric of your band, is that you have this comic book theme, and, you know, your music is, you know, very much influenced and, has a story behind it. So, in comparison, I really like the fact that you kind of make it well known, and people that have comic book, like, there's not too many bands out there, and I hate to say Coheed and Cambria when referring to comic book bands, because I'm sure that's like low hanging fruit for people. But
who else? There aren't that many other real examples, though.
Yeah. But like with that band, I knew they had comic books, and I really liked the band, but I didn't really like let that like persuade me in any way or the other. Like, I liked the music. It had nothing to do with the comic,
Yeah,
and
totally.
I picked up a comic, and, like, I feel like you really have to listen to the music, read through all the lyrics for that to even make any sense. So, there's different ways to introduce that kind of stuff to make it interesting. So,
Talk about a commitment, though, like to have like that whole thing is like one big rock opera for them, right? Like every album's a different like piece of this. I mean, I guess it's not too dissimilar to having an ongoing comic series, but I keep it pretty fast and loose. Like I write about whatever. I can't imagine being like, all right, point A, point B, plot line. Every album tells us next chapter. We're going to try to. I don't know if they wrote it that way, but it seems as though you'd have an end goal if you're making a consistent rock opera, right? Like
it's a little confusing because, I don't feel like the comics were really released as the albums came out. So like I would realize that they made comics maybe 3 albums in or something, or 2 albums in, and can only find one online or something. And so I feel like if they were really pushing that end of just making each album revolve around this comic concept, for some reason it didn't catch on to where like that album came out and then you knew that comic was out. Like I went to Hot Topic for years, would see new releases come out, and randomly you might see a comic, but I just feel like the advertising for that didn't really go as well as it was probably planned. But yeah, we're kind of getting way off topic now.
And then anything about comic books, I'm always down. I just
yeah. I do like the art, though. The art, there's not a whole lot of words, in the comic that I have, and it's just a lot of art. And I'm just not sure, like, as a comic book writer, is this a lot of image, or is it a lot more like wordy?
We just got again. Razor Cake just reamed us about using too many words in our comics. So this is like
okay.
Weirdly rewarding. For issue 1 was the one they have. Issue 2 is going to be coming out in a second. I think you've got issue 1. I try like every illustrator I work with is like cut down the words. And it's true, you want to write as much as you can. You want to build a story. You only have 10 or 15 pages when you're working on a thin budget like this, and you want to have this whole world in there, and it sits in your head and it doesn't feel good to finish, so you just want to keep it going. But then you give it to the next person in, and they're like, fuck, man, there's no room to draw anything. What was the point of having illustrators write a stupid novel? So you got to just keep scaling it back. And there's this perfect point, like, where the gag works visually without too many words. It's like when the song's in tune, like when you're recording something, you can tell that all the instruments, nothing's out of tune, all the drums are in the right place. You can feel it. Like, that's funny versus like, I try to do it where every panel is good. Like, if you were to take a picture of one panel, it wouldn't be like this transitional thing, like Batman walking down a hallway or something, like I don't have space to do shit like that, which makes it hard to have a lot of big visuals sometimes. So I come with the scripts beforehand and then storyboard to a certain degree and work with, there are a couple of different illustrators that I like to work with. Josh Fries from this band Schlub over in San Francisco is one of my favorites. He did the black and white interior illustration of the When I Think That You Have. he's dope. And he, I absolutely just lost my train of thought talking about illustrators, but they get the script from me along with a little bit of a storyboard, and 9 times out of 10, whatever it starts as, I have to change the dialogue or something to fit like what it ends up as. Whereas I've heard that like Stan Lee for Marvel, for instance, will give a description of what happens on the page with no panels, and then when an illustrator comes back to him, they'll have drawn the whole page with word bubbles wherever they want, and he'll just write in the dialogue that he comes up with based on this new image.
Oh.
I thought that was pretty. It doesn't make any sense to me to not have that control as a writer, but it's weird. You know, it's this collaborative thing. You know, it's like being in a band, but it's slower going, and everybody does it in this weird, personal, private way, and so it's conversation, talking about it and making it happen is very different than being in a band, but when it comes together, it's a lot like rock and roll. You know what I mean?
Do you get a lot of, over the years, the other members kind of give their input to help write these stories, or is this kind of, oh, okay.
It's like, at the end of the day, I come up with I do a lot of the concept work and pitch it at the band, and I try to find folks that find this exciting and not just, you know, there's like 50-50. You work with a lot of musicians that like play music with you, but then they'll be like, oh, this comic book is a selling point, huh? Well, I got to go. And, you know, mad respect to you thing.
It's not for everybody, but, you know, the people that you do can,
But, it's interesting because like I grow attached to these characters that like the band's quirks, everybody's quirks are worked into who they are. Like, for instance, our old bassist Kale was from Hawaii, and he was a kung fu champion, and just this like Zen. He would teach people meditation via like Zoom or whatever, and just this very peaceful, laid back guy that loved dissonant, slint music and stuff, and just a cool guy. So we created this like character for him called the Sphinx, who's very mysterious and consistently smiles, and like he's like this level of peace versus like this overstressed band leader archetype, Captain Contingency, and they just bounce off each other. Or like when the band started, we had this character called Jerry Riggs, who was based off of this like an older band member who really, really didn't like the idea of being in a comic book and like really wanted to be in a band, but like everything about it was bothering him. And so it was cool to have this character that was a bit of a foil. Like, I think that with every character, you bring in the faults of the people that you care about, that you play music and create with, and all of your faults become these cartoon images that beef with each other, you know? Like, Fred's character in the comic, Dr. Roxo, is just like consistently playing drums and bands, and kind of like he's like where I unload all the musician stereotypes, like has a minivan, always in a band, willing to jump into any band because he plays drums, all these like cliches that I think are just, you know, it's you try to balance that with this larger weird outer space battle to kind of exemplify how crazy fighting about small stupid bullshit is, you know? Or like even with Stormy Trump, we wanted to have this character where like Cameron's a recent college grad, and he's going through a big transition in his life, trying to figure out what the fuck happens next after you're off whatever track you feel like you're supposed to be on. You get a job, you do this, you do that. So his character, whatever the character's real name, has chosen the Stormy Trump identity to try to be this con artist, but he's much too stressed out, and even though he seems shameless, maybe he really is just like, you know, he's trying to break out of whatever industry he's been assigned to. It's everybody's there, but you know, it's only about a quarter of who they really are, and it's the fun quarter that makes for good reading, you know?
Well, that's cool that you can like take, you know, some characters based on reality, and then kind of go with that. So it makes it a lot more fun, you know, like having some relatable things in life that you can tie into this comic, and it's just not some crazy story. It's got a little bit of, you know, some reality to it.
Band life is just what it makes the most. it's the stuff I like to read about. Like, that's kind of what Fake Publishing Millionaires kind of started with, was a bunch of guys that liked replacements albums and wanted to write stories about just living very down to earth, kind of gritty lifestyles. And as we started to add all these like outer space concepts to it, you realize that, like, I don't know, being in a band isn't that much different than being some weirdo space pirate in a sci-fi movie, you know? You show up in a port, you do your thing, everybody shares the share of the treasure, and you go to the next port, and then, you know, you try not to get scurvy or something.
Right on. So this is a part of the interview where we have fan questions. So get ready for this. We've got a few fan questions. Some of them a little wordy, a little deep. We're going to start off with Justin Church. He says, "When do I get my own Millennial Falcon character? And can it be something like Hal from 2001?"
Justin has been producing and mastering the albums since day one. We met because a dude at a cafe and we were jamming, and he mentioned some connection he had from years ago that had super cheap recording. And I called him up, and he decided to honor this unrealistically cheap rate, and we became buds. It was kind of haphazard. But yeah, I'd love to include you as a character, Justin. Let's talk about it. It seems like an awkward venue.
So this is a two-parter. So the other part of his question is also, will your last tour with the breakdown be turned into a story in the upcoming issue?
It is the plot to the upcoming issue. We've absolutely included that, and it's got all sorts of astro tweakers to represent Nevada in outer space.
Nice.
Yeah.
So we have Nicholas, and I hope I'm saying this right, Lacuna?
Yeah. He plays in a band called Mannequins in Cages, and they're fucking awesome. And if we can't get his last name out, let's just shout out his band.
Hell yeah. So he says, describe the most difficult, frustrating live music experience as a band.
We were playing, off the top of my head, we were playing at Lalo before everything shut down with Wild Jumps and Hot Won't Quit. And,
good bands.
You know, we didn't think to shut off the TVs, which doesn't ever seem like it's going to be a thing. But as we're playing this song, the whole crowd starts to just laugh, which is like a performance nightmare. And we're all playing through it, but kind of like, we decided to just play straight through and pretend like it hasn't happened. And as we're backing up, and we're finally like, you know, on the other side of it, we're in a good mood. It's like 4 songs later. I think Allie from Wild Jumps came over and was like, hey, if you were wondering why everybody was laughing, there was a horror movie on the TV, and then there was a sex scene. And during the sex scene, it was like a lesbian sex scene where a moth monster showed up. And it was like, I can't fault the crowd for thinking that that's the funniest thing ever, while some bands try to take their shit seriously, you know?
Yeah, man, I could imagine, like, nobody wants to be laughed at and you're just confused. You have like no idea what's going on.
Like, what do you do? Stop? Like, it's, at this point, like, there's this, I don't ever want to release this video, but there's a video clip of me shattering my arm. And before we go to the hospital, I swear to God, Fred gets up, grabs a microphone after I'm like trying to pull my arm back together and goes, coming up next. Oh, fuck, what band was it? It was coming up next, Bastard Salt. Thank you. Yeah, so, you know, we're not going to stop if there's like a crowd full of people laughing at me at this point.
Yeah, man. So next question, and I don't know, this is another weird, it's a, man, I don't even want to say it. It's D'Artagnan Bosch.
I don't want to blow up his spot, but that's a member of Bastard Salt.
Okay.
He's got a fake internet name, far be it for me to ruin that.
Yeah, it's so hard. Like, some of these people have these weird names, and I just like, it's brutal to try to announce this. But he says, regarding you getting hurt in your mental state, how were you able to turn a really shitty scenario into something great? How do you feel about it now?
I don't know, man. Like everybody else, I've been trying to make music a thing where I can get some good self-expression and find some kind of a community since I was younger. So, like, we were playing one of 2 shows in a day and I shatter my arm and they're like, yeah, you're not going to be able to play guitar. It's like, you might not be able to move this arm again. I just immediately started calling around before I thought about it to people I knew that played guitar. And from the fucking ER, like literally, like I had just like figured out how to like how to get my pants off enough to pee. And the second thing I thought to do was to like call like the guitarist or anybody I knew that would be able to be like, hey man, I'm shit out of luck. I can't play. I'll sing. Let's just start doing this. I got a year's worth of Planned Parenthood benefits booked. I don't want to drop out because I really want to play with all these great lineups and do this shit. And the synthesizer thing happened because Joe Fortunato, he's a comic book illustration teacher in town. He's done some work with us in the past and played synths with us. He was like, hey man, I'm not the best guitarist, or I don't know if he said that specifically, but I just got these new synthesizers. If you only have one arm, that seems like the prime thing to do. And, I basically, as soon as I could kind of wean off of pain pills enough to like do anything functionally, I just sat down with the piano that we have over at home and just crammed caught up on as much theory as I could. Cause, I grew up playing drums. Drums were my first instrument. And like most drummers, I played in a bunch of punk bands. Like I took lessons, but I was very much like, I'm going to be a drummer, so I don't need to know these things. And you just kind of cut yourself off at the knees. And I think a lot of people do it, and it's not, no judgment, do your thing, be happy. But like, so I moved to guitar from there. And as soon as I couldn't play guitar, it was like, all right, because when you're playing guitar, you can kind of get away with a lot of chord forms and shapes. Like you can fake it by knowing where your fingers are supposed to be without knowing the proper theory, but piano kind of kicks you right in the face. And I had never thought about that seriously, but enough people believed that I could do it, and enough people told me that I would be able to move my arm and be fine again, that when I finally got like my last look, when the orthopedic surgeon finally got his last look, he's like, you shouldn't have been able to get this much, like healed this well, like you shouldn't be able to have this extension. Like it's still fucked up. I can't fully rotate my hand over to, this is as far as I can bend my hand in one direction, like I can do that with one, and that's, but I mean, I have my arm, it's good. And it's strange. I play piano like an idiot now because I learned how to play mono with one hand. So I don't really think about bass chords the way most people do. And it's cool. It's interesting. I didn't think, it's a lot like the quarantine. I got laid up for like 5 months last year, unable to do anything. Would just show up and play a gig, and then go back to like painkiller, hibernation, and physical therapy. And so when all this struck, it was like, all right, weirdly enough, this is 2 years running where I'll spend these exact same time periods indoors. So, I mean, it happens to, I mean, everybody can relate now where you're on this track and you think that you're going to be playing guitar forever, and an accident strikes, and then not only are you unable to like play with your band or do whatever you do in your life now that there's quarantine, it's like all of a sudden you have to figure out how to do that shit with even less than you had before, like do it at home or whatever. I think we're all feeling it now.
So you kind of touched on this a little bit, and I was just curious because we didn't talk about this. You ran a year-long citywide Portland showcase called the Reproductive Rights Rock and raised thousands of dollars for Planned Parenthood.
We started that. It's weird to say, but as soon as we started getting chased down by all these lawyers at Lucas, it occurred to me that I can't just be doing some dumb small bullshit like, fucking with corporations and culture jamming. Like if I really want to try to go out there and make a difference, it's got to be bigger. And like Mike Pence was just fucking, I mean, he always is attacking Planned Parenthood. And the more I read up on it, it just seemed to make the most sense. Like most musicians, Portland's got an amazing thriving music scene, and most musicians don't make a ton of money playing shows. But if we channel that music scene and everybody involved into it, into trying to support a cause as opposed to trying to actually make a living, you can be surprisingly effective. That's, not that I don't wish all bands good luck making money on personal ends, but it really just seemed to make the most sense. Like all of us are walking out of there with like, on a good night, a lot of punk bands in this town are making maybe like, I don't know, like a couple $100 if something's gone well. You know what I mean? And that's not a complaint. That's pretty solid. But like, if you were to take that, do that 12 times a year at a different venue with different lineups, and then add sponsorships and other such things to it, you know, that's actually a difference. Like, it's fucked up when you really read about it. People in Oregon, like for instance, all the Planned Parenthoods in Oregon are along the highway. If you live anywhere further east or west from this specific chain of like quote civilization, maybe you don't have enough money or a bus line to get to these places. And so it's not just like because of the whole Roe versus Wade thing being threatened. It's like crazy to think about people in New York, not like New York City, but New York State, that can't find a place near them. People that it's not. Yeah, I after a year of this, I could go on about this, but it's crazy, and there's never a bad time to donate to this. It's always fucked.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's respect, you know, like, I love, you know, when bands can, you know, put forth towards a cause and really stand for something. You know, it's not all about just making money so you can, you know, fund your next, you know, project or whatever, you know, like there are other things out there too.
It's naive to presume we're going to be able to support ourselves with this. I think it's the dream, but along the way, you got to have some soul. You got to, what's the point of writing punk music and fighting authority if you're just doing it to better your own living situation, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So our next question from Ethan Conrad, he says, and this is a little wordy, so I'll try to say it, you know, I'll try to say it where it makes sense, because I was reading it and I was like, okay, he's going to be...
Just tell me it right down for me, all right?
Yeah. So he says, what are your thoughts on the development of the Transcontinental Railroad in relation to how it shaped European imperialistic ideals? Or imperialist ideals. See, I knew I was going to screw that up. There's just like too many words. I can repeat it for you.
No, it's okay. I saw it when this was submitted, and I scanned it and didn't think much of it, but I realize now it's a westward expansion question, right? Like, it's like that the railroad, the fucking railroad going across the country allowed what previously was just the eastern coast of America to creep all the way out west, take over Mexico and other kind of areas, and do essentially what Europe had done to North America. I don't know. I have a really objective opinion living in the future about it, you know? Like,
yeah. Does this tie into the band at all, or is this just
it's interesting. Like, okay, so I'm going to sidestep this question and mention something, because we're in quarantine and I had an interesting situation happen about music, because I do think it's connected. We write a lot about how, you know, like trickle-down economics is golden shower for poor. It seems like a simple thing to say, but it's just like, it seems shocking how many people, you know, still believe that giving the rich money is going to help us all. But dumb shit like that, I feel like brings people to think that I've got this amazing economic or social like stance. But you know, it's fascinating that it triggers a lot of people to think that I'm aligned with them. Which we got this guy, I don't know who the fuck he is. He's one of those rando musicians that you're friends with on Facebook. Like, ordinarily pretty innocuous, but he sends me like this Plandemic hip hop song that he put out the other day. I feel weird talking about it now because I don't want to give any attention to this, but it was like one of those things where it's like the government's trying to keep us fucking locked in. Fuck this shit. They want to, you know, oppress us. We need to be out there to participate in the economy. And that's always the thing that blows my fucking mind, is like, that's the real detachment point, is like, I totally, like, conspiracy theorists and me will be on the same page about stuff like that, where it's like, distrust the government, all this will get declassified, and whatever you think is right is completely wrong. But then like with the pandemic and the disease and whatnot, being a conspiracy theorist, you get to this interesting point where you're like, yeah, and the disease is fake, and you're like, oh, I don't know about that. We're talking about it's made in the lab, maybe, or they're like, no, it's fake. And then on top of that, they just want to keep you from participating in the economy. And that's always where I get, look, like, you're telling me you don't trust the government, but you trust the economy. You know what I mean? Like, you think that you should be out there in this laissez-faire, beautiful economic system where you're participating autonomously, and at no point are you like affected by large bodies of power. You know what I mean? It just mind-blowing. But you get folks that ask a lot of questions like that and think that I get where they're coming from. And what disturbs me is how close the logic is until that point about the economy. You know, it's like,
yeah,
little things like that, like, really I don't know. Conspiracy theories are a dangerous road to go down, like you said before.
Totally. It's so easy for me to just shut down and just like cut off all of that, because it's just like there's a part of me that wants to like challenge people's theories and be like, well, if that were true, then why is this like this? And like sometimes I want to challenge people, but some people just want to have an argument of some sort and come up with their own idea. And like I've heard so many things about this pandemic that we're in and why we're in it. And while in the midst of the pandemic, there's specials on Netflix, about it. And like, there's just like, I'm like, dude, it's kind of crazy. So for me personally, like, I just like stopped watching the news. I took Facebook off my phone. I deactivated my account. I just wanted a break from it all. 'Cause like being in isolation is depressing enough. And then among seeing all these people getting sick and dying and, not like I don't care, but I was just already going through a tough time, and then adding all that and then conspiracy theories every other day. I was like, I'm just going to cut myself off for a minute and just kind of like let my brain rest. And did you find yourself doing that at all? Like, did you kind of just keep plugged in with it all, or are you just like kind of trying
what's happening about it? It's like, so I was like, Acid Slapped is a lot about conspiracy theories and stuff that I like, and so they're all not liked, but that I find fascinating, and a lot of stuff is getting classified. And it's interesting to then have this thing where I'm now completely disaligned with that community now that we're in this pandemic. It's just a schism where it's like it reminds me a lot of like we were talking about like Fat Records bands, like a lot of those like I love NoFX, I loved a lot of but like for instance when 9/11 happened, like all the bands that were really trashing on the government through the 90s, like you really got to see people's colors, where all of a sudden like Fuck World Trade is a great example. Like when that came out when a lot of other bands weren't immediately saying it that boldly, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like there was this vacuum where all of a sudden everybody's like, oh shit, 9/11, what do we do? And it's like, some bands were already talking trash. Like, it was weird when the Dixie Chicks kind of fired first, and like all of a sudden, like punk bands just came out of the woodwork. I'm not saying it's all, but I feel like that now with the pandemic, where it's like, yeah, I was talking a lot of smack about what's getting declassified, but now it's globally horrifying. It's like, I don't know, it's like that tired look you see on Fox Mulder's face in some episodes. You're like, oh shit, man, yeah, it must suck to have thought about this for so long and now see an even worse thing happening, Yeah. I don't know, it's weird I'd like to eventually have the perspective on what's going on now to be able to make art about it. I shut off a bit when it happened, but we were still doing some live streaming stuff and writing new music. It just, once you hitchhike with all your gear in some stranger's RV, knowing that they're armed to the teeth, it really like, what are you going to do, But
yeah,
eventually it just got the better of us, We stopped rehearsing. We stopped meeting up as often. We still chill and we're recording, but yeah, like I'm sure it's the same with Bridge City, where it's like, I bet, the crew doesn't get together half as much, right?
I haven't seen anybody. Our mixing engineer, Chris Finster, he's here and there, and he stays in the back studio and away from me, because he's like, I'm older, I smoke, I drink. He's like, I just want to stay away. And so like I would see him like maybe twice a week or something, and just for him to go use the bathroom or whatever, he was trying to stay away from me. And then the rest of the crew hasn't been here at all. Everybody is like, like we're trying to catch up on video chat and our chats that we have, our text chats and stuff. We stay in touch. But yeah, it's been rough. Like we're not at all like taking this with a grain of salt. Like we're like all like super like, we want life to go back to normal. So whatever we can do, whatever precautions we can take, whatever, if people are going to say it's a conspiracy theory or try to, talk shit about staying home or staying masked up. Like I just wasn't going to question it, and so we've just decided to go with the flow of things. And I'm hoping next month, when a few businesses open up, that we can really try to take a safe precaution to have sessions, but like it's only the band and us, it's not like a show. So I feel like we can, I feel like we can achieve that and keep safe. And so we're talking about it. We're hoping that we can take new bands on next month, but so far it's kind of like a wait and see. Sorry, I got a little sidetracked. We have one question left. So Nicholas Mata says, So I picked an easy one from him because, Nick he's a little sarcastic. He likes to kind of push things a little bit. I love Nick for that.
We shout him out right here. He's like the king. I don't know. He's just one of the best sound guys in town for sure.
Yeah. No. Nick's great. That dude has always been. I've seen him at so many venues. I mean, he's just been a staple in town for sure.
Yeah. When they used to have the upstairs and downstairs analog venues, I'd always there were a couple times where I'd be playing downstairs and he'd be working upstairs or vice versa, and you'd meet him and be like, "Oh, you're working there, but I'm here."
Yeah, that sucks sometimes when the audio engineer that you like is like. There's probably been like a couple venues like that in town where they had an upstairs and downstairs at the same time.
It's a cool idea. I wish something would get built where the Analog Cafe was. That's such a wasted potential, but I mean, it needed to close given what was going on. Christ.
Totally. I wonder what happened to that place. I haven't even driven by it to see if it's still in business. I mean, obviously with the pandemic.
It's like an empty. They were like, last I heard before, it became an empty building was that they were going to make it a new venue, but people found out that the old owner was still involved with the business, and it got just. I did hear
that. Yeah. So I don't even think we got to his question. His question was, how long have you been a band, and what are your influences? I picked an easy one.
I really like Nick's band Aux 78. They're why I do everything. He didn't expect me to say that, but just deep down from the bottom of my heart, Nick, I have a whole shrine in my bedroom. I don't know. I really like Frank Zappa, but he's kind of an asshole. And I like how you don't know what's going to happen, and I like that in a lot of albums. I think that I grew up. My parents always played a lot of jazz music, and I hated it as a kid because it seemed really academic. But once you kind of dig deeper than what's contemporary and really try to find more esoteric stuff, you realize that it's free in a way that a lot of playing rock music for so long felt very rigid. So anything that makes me see less of a boundary with music makes me happy. It's kind of as good a response as I can give,
Yeah. Cool. Well, man, I appreciate you spending this time with me. I'm stoked to hear the new record when it comes out, and I'll be sure to put Bandcamp links and all that good stuff in the description. And when we put out the interview, we're going to re-release your session that you did. So we'll be reposting that the same day we put out your interview. So I'll get in touch with you on a release date for that. And we'll be in touch. But thank you so much for taking the time. It was good stuff.
You too, man. I'll catch you whenever concerts open back up.
Yeah, man. When we open back up, though, I'll definitely let you know if you guys want to try to squeeze in before Fred leaves. We'd be happy to have you back in. But
out on Friday this week.
Man, that soon.
It was like a 1-2. Cam was like, hey guys, I got to go pursue something else right now. And we're like, cool. Well, with the quarantine, we'll figure out where we're at the end of this. And me and Phil were like, all right, well, let's go figure out where we're going to tour to. We know some folks in Kansas. We'll grab a guitarist out there. Just knock out a tour, come back, meet back up with our buddy and see what's good. But within a day, Fred got this call about his grants, and it's
Uh,
been a whirlwind. That's all within. It was like Audio Cinema closed, the quarantine hit. Fred's got Cam started to get uncertain about. He's trying to find he's trying to get to a better place in his life, and you can't have two mistresses, you know what I mean? Like, I get it, but, and then Fred kind of had to ditch the scene. It was a super bummer, because we're all great people and we all like playing music together, but circumstance has been a real motherfucker lately.
yeah, well, I mean, it's been that way for a lot of us.
Yeah, I have it pretty good comparatively, and I'm not trying to bitch about my small artistic bullshit. Like, it's weird. Perspective sucks because you can't ever say anything definitive.
Yeah, well, the best that we can do right now is try to help the people in need. Do you guys have any shirts and CDs and all that stuff for sale? Is it all in Bandcamp?
We have everything up at Bandcamp, and all our music is free, always on Bandcamp, except the new album we're releasing. To download it, it's a pre-order, so if you download it, it'll cost and we'll send you in the comics.
Okay.
Friends over at All We Got Records have a compilation in the works called We've Got You. It has a bunch of bands on the list, and it was momentarily released, and they're trying to work out exactly what's up with the charities. But it should be out soon. It's got like 20 or 30 bands. They put out, I think they're one of the labels that released Crustfall for Days and Days.
Mm-hmm.
And this compilation, when it comes out, is going to be benefiting people who don't get stimulus packages for one fucked up reason or another, which I'm putting all the politics and fucked up shit aside. You don't even qualifying for it. It's a fucked up scenario. And that should be out soon. I'll keep you posted. There's some badass bands on that of a bunch of different genres. And Ice Queens, I believe, in terms of local bands, is on it as well.
Cool. Well, yeah, no, it's all good, man. But awesome. Well, I'll be sure to check out the new record, and I'm gonna have these interviews ready a little bit early on Patreon. So I'll give you a link to share. We're trying to get ahead of schedule and let people view stuff early before it releases. And so, yeah, I'll be in touch with you about that. Link everybody to check this out. And yeah, we'll be in touch about that. And looking forward to the record when it releases.
Hell yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Cool, man. Well, enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good, dude. Have a great rest of your night.
You too.